DarkOfAllTrades here. Today, we're going to attempt to discuss one topic, and that is if reason and faith are incompatible. For this, I'm going to start by giving the definitions of both of these terms as I understand them for the purposes of this video. Now, each of these terms has multiple definitions, and most of them do not apply to the discussion, and if I need to change the meaning, I will point it out to avoid the equivocation fallacy. These definitions come directly from the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Reason is, quote, a sufficient ground of explanation or of logical defense, especially something such as a principle or law that supports a conclusion or explains a fact, end quote. Faith is, quote, firm belief in something for which there is no proof, end quote. Now these are simply the meanings as I understand them. One could argue that faith in this sense is the same as belief and trust in and loyalty to their God. I don't find this meaning useful, as neither belief and trust in a God nor loyalty to a God is a pathway to truth or understanding. You'll also notice I'm not taking the meaning I usually use for faith, which is the excuse someone gives for believing in something when they don't have evidence for it. Even though these may be functionally the same, I think wording here matters. So with all this, I'm going to get into today's video. This one is by a channel called Catholic Central. You can guess which flavor of Christianity they subscribe to. Their description says the hosts take the religion very seriously, but themselves not so much. I wonder if this is a tactic to reach younger people. Since watching the first little bit of this video, Faith and Reason bar Catholic Central, it seems like they're trying to be like the little bit awkward teenager kind of character, even though they are clearly older than that. Though it has been said that religious humor is about 10 to 20 years behind the rest of society, I'm sure this goes for more than just their humor, and much farther back too. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into the video. I'm going to skip their little skit at the beginning, as I don't think it contributes to their points at all.
Welcome to Catholic Central. I'm Kai.
And I'm Libby. Today we're talking about the relationship between faith and reason.
Now you might be thinking, reason? Even with all the seemingly illogical and irrational things Catholics believe?
Well, that is interesting. Religious content creators who are self-aware and spotlight the idea that at least some people believe some of the things that Catholics believe come off as illogical or irrational. Though that head bob was a little bit weird. It could be that he's trying to dismiss the caricature of the non-Catholic as being irrationally skeptical, but I have to give at least some amount of credit for verbalizing what he did there. Thank you, Kai, for doing so.
Or that Catholics have to check their brains at the church door.
Not true. Although it's too bad, it would make church committee meetings a lot easier.
I know this is supposed to be a throwaway joke, but I have to wonder what he means by this. If people check their brains at the door, how exactly would this make these meetings a lot easier? Would there just be less discussion and debate? That's probably it.
The truth is that Catholics love science and reason.
Yeah, when they can use it to justify their presuppositions. Catholics are no different from any other branch of Christianity, or even most, if not all, theists. They start with their conclusion and try to fit the evidence to those conclusions, ignoring the opposing evidence. Though the Catholic Church has had some progressive stances on a few things more recently, this is the exception and not the rule. The Catholic Church has done so much to stifle scientific exploration and discoveries. One does not need a more clear example than Galileo and his suppression by the Roman Inquisition. He was effectively forced to recant his theory that the Earth moves around the sun. He was placed under lifetime imprisonment, which was changed to house arrest for his scientific research, which was seen as heresy by the church. He still managed to write some of his best work under house arrest. Imagine what he could have done if he had more freedom to investigate.
But believe that we need more answers than what they can give us.
If you need more answers about the world than what we already know from science, then you should go out and investigate for yourself. Study and put forth novel predictions that we can test. Learn more about the natural world. Don't make something up or blindly listen to something someone else just made up without proof.
Since faith and reason both try to connect people to truth.
No, only one of these does. Reason helps us understand the facts of reality and supports understanding. Simply believing in something irrespective of the evidence, and often to the contrary of established evidence, is not a way to connect to the truth. I guess it could be, but if it is necessarily only by accident. There is not a single thing that a person couldn't believe using faith as their justification.
We should first get clear on what we mean by truth.
Oh good, they're going to give a meaning to the terms they're using here. Let's compare what they use with what I put in the intro.
Catholics believe in objective truth, meaning that truth is a reality that exists independently of whether anyone believes it.
I will agree with this meaning. Though I use a slightly different meaning for truth in this sense, this is close enough. There is subjective truth, which is what the individual perceives as true, or what is true for them. If I feel like I'm having a good day, that is subjective truth. If two people witness the same event, what they believe and purport happened is their subjective truth, and then there are often differences in perspectives, leading to variations on what actually happened. This is perspective versus what actually happened.
This is the opposite of moral relativism.
Well, this is not true at all. These two are not opposites, as objective truth is about what exists in reality, while moral relativism is the view that moral truths depend on the individual or group who hold them. Objective truth can tell us that, if compared to an average human, an elephant is big. Take that same scenario and apply moral relativism. You can't, because the size of an elephant compared to a human has nothing to do with morality. It sounds like you're trying to replace objective truth with objective morals. These are not the same thing.
The view that multiple contradictory views about right and wrong can all be true at the same time.
Catholics believe that humans have a natural urge to seek the truth. We're curious to figure it out and don't like it when people lie.
But reason alone isn't enough to figure out everything that's true in the universe.
I'm not sure I agree with this. Perhaps with what our current capabilities are, we're unable to figure out everything that is true in the universe, but that doesn't mean it will stay that way. We've figured out a lot since we developed the ability to form judgments through logic and communicate those associated ideas. Every single time we've figured something out that is actually objectively true, it has come from our use of reason. When people thought that lightning was caused by Thor or Zeus, how did we figure out exactly what causes lightning? We use science, logic, and reason. Every single idea that we once put forth a religious explanation but found out was wrong, how did we find out? We use science, logic, and reason. When we don't have an answer, we don't just make one up. We study, we experiment, we do things to help us get closer to an answer. There is no faith required for any of this.
In fact, virtually every belief system has some element of faith, of trust in something that can't be absolutely proven.
Really? Citation needed. But even granting this, so what? Belief systems tend to involve some form of trust simply because we don't have all the answers, and there are situations where we can't wait until we can absolutely prove everything, otherwise we wouldn't be able to go anywhere. I trust that when I get into my car, I am not going to get hit by someone driving the wrong way. I can't absolutely prove that, but that is part of my worldview. If I waited until I could absolutely prove that, I would never get into my car. So this is either wrong or it says nothing at all. It is a deepity. To the point where it's true, it's trivial. To the point where it's meaningful, it isn't true.
Even people with no religious beliefs have to trust that any of us actually even have the ability to reason.
This seems a lot like that equivocation fallacy I was talking about before. While it isn't explicit, this looks like they're trying to equivocate the term faith to mean trust, and to use it to mean belief in something for which there is no proof when it applies to them. See my video, Professor Dark explains the equivocation fallacy, for more details on this. I use this scenario nearly exactly as an example. I have trust in the sense that I have a reasonable confidence based on mountains of evidence that any given person has the ability to reason. I have evidence, proof that it is likely the case, so I operate as if it is, because to do otherwise, much like waiting for absolute proof of anything, would be detrimental to my ability to do things in society.
As G.K. Chesterton says, reason is itself a matter of faith. It is an act of faith to assert that our thoughts have any relation to reality at all.
G.K. Chesterton was an apologist as well as a writer and philosopher. Of course he would likely compare those two. If he said the opposite, it would be really damaging to his side of the religious argument. Cite a non-religious source.
We talk about a few different kinds of truth based on how we figure it out.
Sometimes we find truth by pure logic.
Like 2 + 2 = 4, or that you can't have a square circle.
Philosophers call this necessary or a priori truth, from the Latin for from before, because it's possible to figure these things out without going into the world and testing anything.
You could lock a mathematician in a windowless room with nothing but Red Bull, chalk, and a blackboard.
Not that we recommend that.
And theoretically, they could prove all of mathematics all over again from scratch.
But you would only know they were actually on a crazy caffeine-fueled math bender if you or someone you trusted actually saw them do it.
Right.
Wrong. This is not true at all, unless this section is specifically about a priori knowledge, in which case this is doubly wrong. You wouldn't need to see the actual drinking of the Red Bulls or watch the mathing being done to figure these things out. We could simply look at the room days later and see empty cans laying around and a chalkboard full of literally all the math, that is one big chalkboard, and make educated guesses based on our previous experiences. We know that writing doesn't just appear on a chalkboard. We also know Red Bull cans are purchased with the liquid sealed inside to lock in the freshness. Just two simple examples of evidence that this is what happened that do not involve us seeing it actually happen. Now, could it have been magic math fairies? I don't think so, but maybe. Could some god have come up from hell and accepted the Red Bull liquid as a tribute and magically transcribed everything on the board for the mathematician? Well, you can't be absolutely certain it didn't happen, right? So by your logic, unless you or someone you trust saw it happen, how could you prove anything? I guess we'll just never know how the random numbers and letters appeared.
Which would be an example of empirical truth. These are things that you can't just figure out by thinking about them. Instead, it takes observation or experiment.
But you don't need to have observed it as it happened. As I said, you can observe it after the fact and make an educated guess. This isn't actually that hard.
So how does this relate to faith and reason?
We need different kinds of tools for figuring out different kinds of truth.
But you said Catholics believe in absolute truth. If it is absolute, why do you need anything else? Why would you even need a different kind of faith? Just cite absolute truth.
As Pope St. John Paul II put it, faith and reason are like two wings on which the human spirit rises in contemplation of truth.
Newsflash, Pope believes in faith, more at 11.
Science is necessary for figuring out how the physical world works.
But no scientific experiment can tell us our purpose.
I half agree, but likely not for the reason these people would expect. First, we don't actually have an intrinsic purpose. We only have purposes that humans put on us. We decide what we want to do with our lives. Sure, we can pretend that it's from a god, but it doesn't change anything at all. Objectively, it came from a human. However, let's grant that we have a purpose not given by humans. How would we determine what that purpose is? How do we know when we're fulfilling our purpose? Once we have that, we can develop hypotheses for what our purpose would be and then test those to see what may come more naturally if that is a criterion. Some methods won't meet the criteria, while some may. We figure it out by observation, hypothesizing, and experimenting.
What it means to live a good life.
Actually, I think it only comes from observation and testing. How do we know if something is good or not? I would say that we evaluate the effects of our lives here in reality. Are we causing a lot of damage to nature and our society? Well, we may not be living a good life. Are we planting trees to regrow forests, helping our neighbors in need, and donating some of our money to charities? Well, these are some things that are generally associated with living a good life. How do we know this? We figured it out through observation and testing, though some testing dates pretty far back to how humans evolved.
What happens after we die, or whether there's a god and what he, she, or it might be like.
This part is more of a wait-and-see kind of thing, though. Though if we assume a god exists and assign properties to it, we can make educated guesses as well. This touches on the realm of science. If a god exists in reality, then we can develop a test to determine this, but that burden is on the ones making the claim that it does exist. Since we have no good reasons to believe that a god exists, we have no need for unbelievers to develop the hypothesis to be tested to show the existence of a god, but some still do anyway.
Or even whether deliberately killing an innocent person is wrong.
Once we determine a goal or wanted outcome, we absolutely can experiment to determine this. If an action causes more harm than it does good, then it is likely wrong. Is dropping a piano from the 3rd floor on someone good or bad morally? If the goal is to not kill them, we can do an experiment to determine things like the velocity of the piano, how much damage the piano and the ground or test dummy takes, and compare that to the strength of the human body to withstand force and not be hurt. We can absolutely experiment to determine if killing an innocent person is wrong based on a set goal. You do this too, but we just go off of previous knowledge. I know I'm very close to the is-ought problem here.
For that stuff, we need philosophy.
From the Greek, for love of wisdom.
And theology.
From the Greek, study of God.
And faith.
From the We figure out moral and philosophical truth by a combination of a priori thinking, life experience, and reflections on human nature written by wise people.
See, you even admit that no faith is needed to determine any of this. What kind of truth are you thinking we need faith to reach?
And yes, we mean figure out, not just take God's word for.
So you can read about God in the Bible.
You can observe the natural world he created to get to know more about him.
So you're saying that you can do science to learn more about God? How does observing things in the world get you to, therefore, God? Is this going to be the teleological argument? That's a pretty bad one that is countered by doing exactly what is being said here, observing the world to see things that run counter. One of these such things is called stupid design.
And you can also make philosophical arguments for an eternal, transcendent creator who is the first cause of all things.
I'm not going to dive into the first cause argument here. I'm simply going to put a simple refutation to the idea that there must have been a first cause and that it is the God that they believe in. One question. Could something that didn't create the universe have created your God? If you say no, then you'd have to back that up, which you can't do because you rely on special pleading to say your God is the first cause. If yes, then your God isn't actually the first cause, but had a cause itself, and your regression continues.
But Catholics also recognize that some ideas are so huge that we as humans can't fully wrap our minds around them.
How long is eternity?
Eternity is all of time. It may not even have a specific length.
What does it mean for God to become human?
It doesn't mean anything.
Can God make a YouTube video so boring even he can't sit through it?
Don't worry, we're not trying to test that out.
More of the jokes, though still being self-aware, I see.
When reason and philosophy come up just a little short, it takes a certain leap of faith, realizing that we can't know something fully, coming to accept that uncertainty and eventually embracing it.
But you aren't doing that. You're doing the exact opposite. You are so uncomfortable, to use your words, not knowing something fully, that you have to make up a God to fill the gaps in your knowledge. Isn't that a type of bad argument that uses faulty logic? What is that called?
Catholics recognize that some things remain mysteries, beyond our ability to fully understand, and we trust in God to guide us through Scripture and the Church.
What is the difference between this and just listening to some guy or guys who made up stories but don't actually know what they're talking about? How can you determine the difference?
This isn't just about religion, though. All the biggest things we as humans do take a leap of faith.
You're getting dangerously close to that equivocation fallacy. A leap of faith is often used to mean do something when you don't have all the evidence you need to make a rational decision. This can happen in human life, though I would argue that I don't do anything like that. I have a feeling there will be examples, so if I need to, I will address them.
When you marry someone,
I certainly hope you're not taking a leap of faith when you marry someone, and that you have sufficient evidence to conclude it is likely a good idea. Note, in some cultures this wouldn't apply, especially for some instances of arranged marriages, but then again, there isn't a faith required for that either, as you're pressured, coerced, forced to do so.
have a child.
Another thing I hope you aren't taking a leap of faith on. You are carefully weighing the evidence, the pros and cons of having a child, and evaluating your ability to care for this child as a couple and potentially as a single parent as well. This is one reason why having an unplanned child tends to have a negative stigma attached to it.
Or choose life as a priest or nun.
Yep, you got me there. All leap of faith. You know, that normal thing for everyday humans to do.
You're signing up for a commitment far beyond what you can imagine on your own.
Catholics believe that when we take that leap of faith and trust God, God helps us along the way.
Well, Catholics are wrong.
But we should be clear. Although Catholicism at its best promotes a healthy cooperation between faith and reason,
LOL.
not everyone lives that out perfectly.
Superstition is where people use faith when it's not the right tool for finding truth.
Now we've added another term. This is a strange definition of superstition. According to the Oxford Dictionary, superstition is, quote, a widely held but unjustified belief in supernatural causation leading to certain consequences of an action or event, or a practice based on such belief, end quote. With this, I would agree that it is unjustified, but that is because of the faith by definition.
Like believing you got sick because you didn't comment amen on your aunt's Facebook post about Jesus.
It's probably because of an ancient curse.
It's also superstition to focus on a precise form of religious practice instead of interior disposition.
For non-Catholics or other forms of Christianity that don't specifically talk about this, interior disposition is the idea of keeping one's spiritual life private. This could involve not praying in public or not discussing their faith. If you know the terrible 2015 movie War Room, then you know a bit about this. It is a bit interesting for this to come up in a very public video, though. I just watched the next few seconds, and it seems they mean something closer to internally believing in what you are saying or doing in your worship. It is a bit different.
Basically, what's in your heart.
So if you say 100 prayers but you don't mean them, just saying the words won't do you any good.
But if you mess up the words to the Our Father, that doesn't cancel it out.
Then why do it at all if doing it wrong doesn't cancel it out? Why not just choose your own way of worshiping and not follow these random assortments of guys who intentionally cover up when some people in their club do absolutely terrible things to children? Do your own thing and think for yourself. Stop giving money to these literal monsters.
It's this superstitious thinking that has sometimes caused Christians throughout the centuries to feel threatened by science.
But the Catholic Church actually has a Pontifical Academy of Sciences.
Well, the Vatican is a city-state. Having some sort of center for the study of the natural world is not that surprising. Of course, it certainly doesn't undo all the scientific repression the Church did throughout its long and bloody career. I'm not going to go further into the issues with this.
It encourages us to use faith and reason to complement each other.
Faith and reason do not complement each other. The only thing they have in common is that they are something like a tool used to lead to a conclusion. Other than that, they're nearly opposites. One uses evidence, and one specifically does not.
Seeking truth in whatever forms we can find it.
Because in doing so, we can know God better and better understand the world we live in.
As Pope Leo XIII said back in 1893, truth cannot contradict truth.
Yet you believe in a God anyway.
And as Jesus tells us, the truth will set you free.
Rather than check our brains at the door, Catholics believe that asking questions of all perceived truth is actually a good thing, because it's a sign of a healthy, active, curious faith.
I'm not sure I agree with your assessment, but I encourage asking questions as well. By doing so, seeking knowledge and understanding, one is more likely to not believe in your God. The best way to become an atheist is to read the Bible.
And in case you're questioning whether we should still be talking, the answer is no.
I couldn't agree more. From here, they do a typical outro, noticeably still talking. I'm going to skip their advertising and go right to the summary. So what was actually said in this video? Catholics love science and reason. Faith is what we use when we want to know the answer to something that science and reason hasn't answered yet. Every belief system uses faith or trust without complete evidence. Catholics believe in objective truth. Objective truth and moral relativism are opposite. God is the first cause. People take leaps of faith. Be curious. The ending there was okay, but the rest of it was mostly wrong, objectively. That's it for this one. What did you think? Do you think Catholic Central adequately expressed that Catholics use science and reason along with their faith? Or do you think, like me, that they're using the God of the Gaps arguments to fill in the lack of knowledge that they're uncomfortable with? Let me know in the comments below. It just makes sense through reason that if you enjoyed this, then the like button absolutely needs to be pressed. Though, if you aren't sure but are interested in more, you can take the leap of faith and hit subscribe to get more like this. Special thanks as always to my patrons, Long-Haired Lefty and Jammin' Bomb. They are the foundation of trust that keeps my channel going. If you would also like to be part of the absolute truth, you can add yourself to that foundation for as low as $1 a month at patreon.com/DarkOfAllTrades. Every little bit helps me get to the next video a little bit faster. And as always, keep learning.